Hi, I'm Sarah Smith. I'm a horticulturist here at Rogers Gardens, and today we're going to talk about spring bulbs. I know it feels kind of funny because this is the fall, but this is the time when you're purchasing your spring bulbs and having that little time through the fall and winter to kind of dream about your spring garden. This is when you go out and purchase all your bulbs. So you want to do that in September and October. That way you get the best pick of the bulbs. If you go to a store and you wait too long, you'll find that you're looking through the bags and all the boxes of the bulbs and your bulbs are getting mushy, they're kind of tiny, they're scrawny. Sometimes if they're loose bulbs in boxes, they're totally mixed up and they're the wrong bulb and you're gonna plant it and find you have the wrong color. There's no instant gratification necessarily to bulbs, but that I think is one of the best parts about gardening. This is something that you pre-plan for, and when they come up in the spring, all that time that you waited makes it completely worth it, and it makes bulbs just feel completely magical. It's so amazing that something from a tiny little thing like this comes up and is this really beautiful, gorgeous flower that looks so pretty. There's certain ones that you want to chill and certain ones you don't need to chill. So you really want to buy your bulbs this time, and you're going to be planting the ones you don't need to chill in November or December. The ones that you need to chill, you're going to take home and you're going to put in your refrigerator. You want to make sure that you don't put them next to fruits in your refrigerator. So if you have a separate compartment or a vegetable drawer that you can clean out and keep your bulbs in there, that's the best. The ethylene and stuff from ripening fruits will affect your bulbs and it'll cause them to pre-sprout in your refrigerator, and that's no fun because then when you put them in the ground they come up and they're really scrawny and they're not very pretty. So the ones that you're going to be planting in November and December are the ones that you don't need to be chilled. Those are your freesias, your ranunculus, your alliums, your snowdrops, and your daffodils. The ones that you do need to chill are going to be your tulips, your hyacinths, and some of your crocuses. So again, just make sure you keep them away from that fruit, have a dedicated space for them. Don't forget that you have them in your refrigerator, which I have done a couple of times, which is really sad. Make sure that your partner or your spouse knows what they are so they don't take them out of the refrigerator thinking they're an onion and cutting them up, which I've also had happen. So you just want to be careful about that. Maybe put a reminder in your calendar for that. Most of them that you chill, you want to chill from like 4 to about 8 weeks or so. Most of your packaging will tell you how long it needs to be chilled. If you don't know, it's always best to Google it, check it so you know what time, and then that reminder in your calendar will be really super helpful. When you're picking out your bulbs, I find the more the better. Bulbs really make a beautiful impact when you have a large quantity of them. Sometimes when I get a couple of really unusual tulips and I only buy 3 or 4 or 5 and I plant them and they come up, they look kind of sad and lonely. I think a larger impact definitely does better. I'm talking maybe 12 to 15 really look really pretty together. You're also wanting to pick them according to what their sun requirements are. It's no fun to buy something that needs a lot of shade and you plant it in the sun and it doesn't come up. So that's really important. Or you plant something that needs a lot of sun, it comes up and it really stretches and it just falls over very quickly. So the sun requirements are super important to check as well. It should always say it on the bag or in the box that you find the bulbs in. That's really important. If in doubt, Google it or call us. We're here, we can answer questions for you. That's what we're here to do for you. And then the other thing that you want to make sure that you're really paying attention to is the depth when you plant your bulbs. All of them have really, really different requirements for how deep they need to be. And it's not as simple as it is with seeds. I find sometimes with seeds, if it's really small, you plant it shallow. If it's really big, you plant it deep. That's not the case with bulbs necessarily. So the depth is really, really important. Tulips, for example, need to go anywhere from 4 to 6 inches, where some of your irises need to be planted almost near the surface. So that's a really important factor to know. And again, on the back of the bag, it should tell you that, or again, you can Google it, and there's really some kind of cool tools and stuff that will help you with that. So sometimes you can find these trowels that actually have the depth on here, so that's really nice, so you're not troweling a hole and using a ruler and trying to figure out the depths. It's really nice and convenient to have something that actually has this on here. And I'm sure you've seen these around. This is a bulb dibber. A lot of you probably wondered what this is for. The exact reason is that you can push this into the ground. It has your depths here, and that helps you when you're preparing your bulbs to know your depth, because it's very, very important. If you plant a bulb too deep, it won't come up properly. If you plant it too shallowly, it'll come up and fall over, which is really sad. So this is a really helpful tool to have as well. The other really important thing you want to do is make sure you plant it the right way. What's upside down and what's right side up? Some bulbs are very different. Not all bulbs are technically bulbs. There's chromes, there's rhizomes, there's tubers, there's all different kinds of things. We classify bulbs, pretty much use it as a broad term for anything that has a body that stores all the nutrients under the ground and goes dormant. So this, for example, is a daffodil bulb. This one's really easy to tell which way is the right way up and which is the right way or the wrong way down. This has the roots here and the pointed top goes up. So this is the correct way to plant it. Some are a little bit more complicated. This is a Ranunculus tuber. So when you're looking at this, how you want to plant it is toes down. So when you see what it looks like, it really makes a lot of sense. This has all these little tiny tubers that run down, and the top is here. So toes down for this guy. When it comes to watering, you don't want to overwater your bulbs. Bulbs actually really originate from areas that are a little bit more drier, and because of our association with tulips and the Dutch, we tend to think that they need a lot of water, which they actually don't. When they're dormant, you really want to be able to cut back the water a little bit on them. When they're starting to sprout, that's when you're really going to want to make sure that you're giving them adequate water. You also want to make sure that your soil isn't holding too much moisture, because that also will cause the bulbs to rot out. So if you have an area that you water really, really frequently, that might not be the best place to plant a bulb. You can always put them in pots, so that way you can control the water a little bit. You also want to make sure that when you're planting your bulbs, you're adequately feeding them. There's really two crucial points when you want to feed your bulbs. When you first plant them, you want to put your fertilizer in the hole. That way they're pulling up that fertilizer for their first bloom. And then you want to feed them again when you first see sprouts on them. That's the only two times you want to feed. And I really find that a granular fertilizer works way better than a liquid fertilizer, because it stays near the bulb and it actually helps that pull up all the nutrients that it needs to store for its growth. The rose and flower mix that we use from Down to Earth is my favorite one to use on bulbs, because it has that really high middle number and it makes the bulbs really happy. Also, when you're feeding them this spring, they are pulling up some of that nutrients and they're storing it for the next year. So that also brings me to the next point. What do you do with your bulbs when they're done flowering and you have just all the foliage that's above ground? It's always best to keep your bulbs deadheaded so you get more flowers, and then you want to leave all that foliage above the ground as long as you can possibly handle it. I know sometimes it gets a little ratty and a little sad looking, but what's happening is all those leaves are photosynthesizing and again taking all that nutrients and storing it down into the bulb so you get a really great bloom the next year. Some bulbs here in Southern California come back, some don't. Some examples of the ones that come back sometimes really, really fantastically, the longer you have them in the ground and the more you're feeding them and leaving all the foliage above ground, is your daffodils come back really great, your narcissus, the snowdrops come back really fantastically, the alliums. Some of the alliums we even sell here in a store are California natives, which is really fun to have in the garden, and your ranunculus. So as long as you can handle seeing that foliage, the better. Don't braid it, don't tuck it. You want to let them have full exposure to the sun as long as you can handle it there. The other thing to really consider is if you have a large area prepared for bulbs, you put them in the ground. The way I like to do them is kind of just scatter them on the ground so that way they're spaced a little naturally. I think it looks a little funny if you have it in a grid pattern. So I just kind of drop them onto the ground and where they fall is where I plant them. But then you have all this bare ground, and sometimes that's really disappointing to sit there and wait through all of fall, all of winter to spring till you have something that comes up. So companion planting ground covers around those bulbs is really nice because you have something there. You can also pick really pretty colors to complement your foliage and your flowers when they do come up, that makes it feel really special. So some of the examples that I really like to use is I love the gray colors For example, like the lamb's ear and the licorice with my more pastel pinks. I think that looks really, really pretty when they come up together. Also, your alyssum and lobelia work really well too as a ground cover for them to force their way through. So some of my favorite combinations is using these really pretty gray foliage plants, for example, like the lamb's ear and the petite licorice. I love the grays mixed with my pastel pinks and whites. They look really pretty and complementary together. Another really great one that's really easy to do is your lobelia and your alyssum. Alyssum, that white and really dark green, looks super pretty with the different really yellow daffodils. Same with the very bright blue color of your lobelia with those bright yellows and oranges. We also sell at Rogers Gardens a lot of different bulbs for forcing inside. So that's a little bit of a different process, obviously, than growing them outside. Forcing them inside, you keep them inside to enjoy the blooms inside as well. A classic example is the Paperwhites, just the regular pretty beautiful white Paperwhites. The smell on them is fantastic. A lot of times people really associate that specifically with Christmas. They are really, really beautiful. We sell really fantastic Paperwhite bulbs. This is a great example of the different sizes. This is the typical size of the bulb that you're gonna find at most retailers. They're really small. When they do sprout inside, you typically only get one flower stalk on it, and it's a little underwhelming. These ones here are the bulbs we sell, and look at the difference. They're actually 125% larger typically by diameter, and the nice thing about this is one bulb is gonna give you multiple flower stalks. I had one last year that gave me 4 flower stalks on it. If you have any questions for us, you can always post those in the comments down below, and we'll do our best to answer them for you. You can also call us here at the garden. We can answer all those questions for you as well.